3 American service members were killed in action over the past few days as the United States and Iran inch closer and closer to a return to all-out war. U.S. Central Command announced yesterday the death of an American soldier in northern Iraq who was killed during the disposal of a downed Iranian drone. 2 U.S. soldiers were also killed on Friday in Jordan during an Iranian missile barrage, and 1 still remains missing. The latest fatalities raising the death toll of American military personnel in this Iran war to 17, while hundreds of other troops have been injured. The 2 sides, meanwhile, are continuing to exchange fire. The U.S. announced a new round of strikes overnight for the 9th consecutive night, as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the loss of U.S. soldiers, quote, only stiffens our resolve. Iran says at least 50 people have been killed and more than 500 injured since the U.S. resumed its latest bombing campaign. In return, Tehran is once again targeting U.S. bases and other sites across the Gulf, including attacks on a power and water treatment plant in Kuwait. As for what comes next, a senior Iranian government official told MS Now that the memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran is, quote, no longer valid. And a senior foreign diplomat inside Tehran who's linked to the negotiations told us that there's no hope of peace in the near future. And in yet another sign that the memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran is collapsing, President Trump yesterday called for Congress to add Iran to the Russia sanctions bill. The president made that announcement on Truth Social yesterday, calling it important while referencing the late Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who had spearheaded and co-sponsored this very legislation. It's just been sitting there waiting for the White House to give the Senate the go-ahead. The Russia sanctions bill would allow the U.S. to impose tariffs on the 5 largest buyers of Russian oil. The president asking for Iran to be added further undermines the initial memorandum agreement between Washington and Tehran, which in part was aimed at ending sanctions for Iran as the ceasefire progressed. I want to bring in MS Now White House reporter Akayla Gardner here on set with me. Akayla, first of all, tragic to hear that more American service members have died in this war. Talk about how the administration is or isn't changing its view of what's happening in the region, especially as you've got Pete Hegseth saying it only stiffens our resolve.
Yep.
But does it?
That is one of the rhetoric or one of the messages that really struck me over the weekend. When it comes to how President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth are talking about the aftermath of these strikes, they are not signaling an eagerness to get back to a ceasefire. They are signaling a readiness to respond. Something that's been so interesting to me is, depending on who you talk to in the administration, so many people have a different view. If it's J.D. Vance, he's talking about diplomacy. He's talking about getting back to the negotiating table. Yeah. President Trump said over the weekend he couldn't care less that memorandum of understanding is no longer being recognized by Iran's supreme leader. And the supreme leader said Trump's signature is worthless and invalid, really raising questions about how these 2 sides get back to the negotiating table, and how can the U.S. trust Iran's word that they would respect any future agreement. And as you heard from those diplomats and officials to our colleague Inzamam Rashid, there is no sign of end right now in any time in the near future. I think there's real concerns about how far this goes on. And something I've heard from Republicans is forever wars don't start as forever wars. We were told this operation was going to last a few weeks. We are now 5 months in, and this is not what the administration promised, and yet here we are in the situation that we can't find ourselves out of.
And the midterm elections grow ever closer. I know that the administration likes to say that they are not on a timeline or on a calendar, but that is going to have some very real ramifications for these foreign policy decisions that the administration is presently making. And I wonder, when you start taking in tandem that this sanctions package that really has for months had over 80 bipartisan co-sponsors. One of the leaders on it was the late Senator Graham. Yeah. This is apparently one of the things that Graham himself was speaking to the president about in the hours before he passed. What is the White House now saying about the role that they're hoping this sanctions package that now might lump in Iran could do to maybe shake things up in the U.S.'s favor?
I mean, the thing that I really was thinking about is one of the things that the U.S. made clear is that they were going to give sanctions relief as a part of that memorandum of understanding. It just underscores the fact that they're totally okay with walking away from the negotiating table. And to your point, it's not just the economic toll. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see gas prices cross $4 today. They were knocking on the door literally yesterday. But the human toll, can you imagine these families probably had such relief when that MOU was signed? there are still thousands of U.S. troops in the Middle East. And now here we are just weeks later from that signing that the administration had really hailed as this huge breakthrough. And 2 service members for the first time dying by combat fire since, frankly, the very early days of this war. I mean, it's just a major escalation, and the U.S. has responded, and I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see those consecutive strikes that we've seen over the last week or so.
What do those strikes ultimately lend to? I think that is the question that all of us are forced to grapple with, and it's not just us sitting here talking about it. It's a practical conversation being had on Capitol Hill right now, and Secretary Hegseth as well as General Kane are going to be up on Capitol Hill Tuesday afternoon. Again, they're there for an appropriations hearing about the money being sent to the Pentagon, but it comes as Republicans are talking about sending tens of billions of more dollars to the Pentagon at a point where the Iran war's price, the toll of it from a human perspective, from a financial perspective, is very much still in the mix. And so to what end is the real question?
This is why it's so important for us to continue to criticize and look critically at what the administration is saying, because we were told that Iran's military capabilities were obliterated, and yet here we are with the very same objectives that we started with. I mean, the rhetoric that we heard over the weekend from Energy Secretary Chris Wright is we need to stop Iran from terrorizing the region. We need to stop them from taking commerce hostage, of course, a reference to the Strait of Hormuz. We were told all of these objectives were achieved and that the MOU was just this path to get to this permanent end and a ceasefire. There's serious questions about how the administration has characterized Iran's military capabilities, and I think the strikes that we saw over the weekend is just evidence of that.
Where is Vance in this? He was the leader of these negotiations. He was funneling back and forth to Islamabad for the first round of talks. He was defending the MOU itself in the immediate aftermath of its announcement. I know he just did a very lengthy stint on Joe Rogan. But where is he in this?
I mean, his allies say if J.D. Vance was president right now, we would not be at war with Iran. I think when you talk to people in Vance's camp, they feel as though hopefully that he will be viewed positively as somebody who tried to create peace. But he had such a major role in these talks, and it really feels as though right now he's sidelined. We are talking about what has been indirect talks. There's no longer direct talks between the U.S. and Iran, and frankly, over the weekend, it's not clear that there's any conversations happening right now. That is my question, is when are those conversations going to start again, whether it's Qatar or other intermediaries really facilitating those talks? But I mean, Vance has just seemed like an outside voice at this point. He wants there to be diplomacy, but President Trump and Pete Hegseth don't so much.
Yeah, I think we are watching some interesting camps emerge within this White House when it comes to the Iran conflict itself, as well as how to get out of it. But again, we've seen the president say negotiations are on, negotiations are off. Things can happen pretty fast, but I think you're right. How do they get back on track at this point, given the background and the last 9 days of consecutive strikes that we've seen, and now adding to the death toll of American service members? The stakes are immensely high. They always have been, but certainly a very, very tragic reminder this weekend. MS Now White House reporter Akayla Gardner with a lot of questions to start the week. Thank you.